It does seem like there's a Western, specifically Californian influence that is being pushed across the entire medium and into other countries, other regions. Have you, in your time, have you seen, the companies Blackrock have been thrown out, right? The idea that Blackrock is investing in companies and such. I don't know. I'd love to hear
Biggest
your
asset
thoughts on
manager in the world. I
what's
mean, like,
that.
right? It's the biggest asset manager in the world, right?
Right.
Um,
Have you seen their influence firsthand? Have you seen that thrown down?
I'll put it this way: companies of this size and overall private equity, like companies who invest and who runs a lot of assets and management, didn't knew about the existence of the gaming industry before the COVID. But
Okay, so what happened
it,
then? What
it
what
was too
happened during
small.
COVID?
Well, during COVID, a couple of interesting things happened. A lot of industries went into decline, and gaming industries was on the rise for a couple of reasons again, because people were sitting home and they're trying to play an escapism, going into the video games, and they also had money for it, especially in the United States, because people been getting stimulus checks. So people were getting free money, buy some games, and it was just curve, which is going up and up and up, like very steeply. I mean, and people who's been in video games, they just got this feeling that game industry is somehow invulnerable, and will exist always, and it will go up always. And that promise was sold to a lot of investors in venture investment, in the private equity investment, and to the asset management sometimes. And if you would look at the list of the investors in general, like in bigger companies, you would see very weird companies where they're like pension funds, for example. Like it's because people started to perceive video game industry as something more or less important. But people, I mean, again, I want to come back to this analogy, like where people are telling that Larry Fisk is sitting. I don't know. It was the basement with the Koreans. He's sitting at the roof, right? Like, and he's
Right.
just looking down the London or New York, whatever and he's like, "I'll make everyone trance. It's Tuesday. I'm a multi-asset billion manager, and I have decided that my secret agenda for all of you, like it's just to change your sexuality." It's not like that, like though there is another reason which is not cool as well, like so. And this reason is like just if you would go online and if you look like what are the 10 most diverse companies in the world, right? You would see companies like Deloitte and EY, like Big Four, right? Like you would see Marriott probably. You would see Blackrock being somewhere at this list. You will see Accenture, but in a bunch of others. But the idea is that you would see a number of global companies who has more than 100,000 people staff, and they all provide flat services. So for them, diversity kind of makes sense because Accenture, for example, like is a company who operates in all of the countries in the world, and they need to apply to a bunch of other people and companies, and they want to have people on the ground and boots on the ground, right? Like it's very far from the creative. Another interesting, funky example about, do you know what was one of the most diverse companies back at the end 80s, beginning of 90s? I mean, like it's maybe a myth, like, but I've been told this by someone.
No.
Central Intelligence Agency.
Ha, that's
For
funny.
obvious reasons, right? Because you need to have agents of all of the variety of like representations and stuff. Like it makes sense practically. Like,
Can
but yeah,
Can I ask you a question though, real quick about that? So obviously, the idea of diversity is it's a common theme we see in the video game space. We need
Mhm.
DEI, when diversity, equity, inclusion, but it does seem like there's a Western, specifically Californian influence that is being pushed across the entire medium and into other countries, other regions that these countries like they never would have even thought about this at some
it's
point,
very simple explanation to it. I mean,
Sure.
like it's so a lot of these companies, like from entertainment in general, when they started to grow and grow big, and it's big for us. I mean, like for Mastercard, it's not big. For Vanguard, it's not big. For
Hmm.
Canadian pension fund, it's not big at all. I mean, like, until it got big to the point where they started to soak in a lot of people from other enterprise businesses for whom like diversity is a functional tool, for example. And those people would be hired for a position of vice president and senior vice president and a bunch of other people into the gaming and movie companies, and they will bring in all of those practices, and they will build those practices internally and build those pipelines based on what they've been taught at the previous occupations. I mean, like, and they started to use their networks and connections and stuff and everything. And in many cases, and in many instances, people are like, oh, there's smart suit people who's been working so much for a great company. I have a question for them. Why did they went away from the successful company? Maybe because they were not the best ones, like maybe because they lost an opportunity over there, but they went into the new business, found out a bunch of nerds. They learned they can really bamboozle, like in a lot of senses. And they just introduced all of these practices. And that became a part of an issue. I mean, like with DUI, like is only one of the agendas. It's just we know about that, and the way we know about that because of Sweet Baby INC. There are others. There is, for example, a carbon emission sustainability agenda. For example, a sustainability in general. Like saving world from the hunger.
Right.
And in a lot of senses, those agencies, I mean, like they are a racket-based business. Like they're a business that goes into the businesses and say, if you do not do that, we will go and talk to this specific pool of investors and people with money that you do not support their values. And if we do, they would not communicate to you, and you will lose them as a potential source of money.
Right.
This is like almost any consultancy work in general.
Which is what we saw with SBI, Sweet Baby Inc. and them saying, like, have a talk with your community, or have a talk with your marketing side and see what a horrible thing of, kind of the veiled threat aspect of
intimidation.
Right.
Yeah, that's what I don't like. Obviously diversity is a super cool thing, but the minute the diversity is a statistic to be sold to an investor, it stops being genuine, and you got to ask questions.
Yeah. It also negatively influenced the production quality in general, because like one of the issues of the industry is that when industry started to scale, especially after the COVID, coming back to these promises, a lot of studio heads and a lot of people who's been involved into large ambitions, like they went into these boardrooms, into investor rooms, and the conversation would be very simple. I mean, like, think about you running a studio of 500 people and you just made this awesome game, right? Like in 3 years, let's say, and it brought you 100 million revenue. Everything is very good. And you would go and talk to people with money, and they would look at that and they would say that, look, I mean, like, we saw figures after the COVID. How about you business guys will make 3 games in 2 years if we would give you $500 million? And people would be like, sure. And they would go back and talk to production, and production would be, you're insane. 9 women do not give a birth to the one child in 1 month. And people with money who already done this promise, they would be, well, we probably will just find other production people who are more compliable, and who would just do whatever we tell them, maybe compromising the quality, and that was an issue, and it's still an issue.
So there's this huge influx of money. Let's talk about the expansion of the industry, right? Mm-hmm. So you have this huge influx of money. They're like, hey, we don't, if you're not going to do it, we'll bring in more people, or we need to hire more people here. As an industry expands, like the gaming space has in the last 5, 6, 7 years, right? Mm-hmm. Specifically, as you said, since COVID, there's going to be a watered down factor associated with it. Where like you're not going to have the top talent. You're just going to have, you see this with any sort of sports league or anything where the talent is not as good as
universal.
It was. Yeah.
It's universal. I mean, like, and again, on the scale, especially when the scale is too quick to control the bar of quality of people you're hiring. And let's be honest, most of the HR departments should be completely disbanded into the gaming industry because they're completely disqualified, completely like non-qualified to do any job.
Why do you say that?
Well, because like HR mostly need to do onboarding, offboarding, and the conflict mitigation management, and they do not do any of this in a good quality. Like most of the stuff that HR does is some form of the onboarding, which is often lame, lame because like they do not understand criteria of people to be onboarded. Like you probably heard from a lot of people, like being just the stupid conversation of, oh, we need to hire someone with 7 years of experience from AAA. That doesn't mean anything. That phrase just doesn't mean anything. It often means just worse things than better things, like that qualify people. And HR is mostly like about around 100%. I mean, like their job, and I'm surprised that people surprised when they hear that, is to protect management and to protect the bottom line of the company. I mean, like it's just what they do. And like that's been an issue as well. I mean, like and that means that the hiring process is often compromised in general. Like it's not just best people get in, but people with references, people who are more compliable, and people who are more adjusted for the corporate communication get in. Like, and that's a big difference. So not the people with skill, not people with talent. And because of the quick scale, I would say that there would be three groups of people who are currently inhabit like most of the gaming companies. One of them would be people who just appeared recently. They're very pragmatic. They do things for money. I have no grudge or sympathy with them. I just don't care. We're like in a completely different cultural spectrum. I mean, like they're not really gamers. They have one practical skill, which is typically very medium. They just sit down there and model stuff or like create gears or whatever.
So these are grunts, if you will.
Yeah,
like
pretty much. I mean, like
right.
it's just people who do linear work. There are people who kind of can make games, and they strongly disagree with what executive and management and people who constantly involve into the process say, but they have life liabilities. Like someone has mortgage, someone has relationship, someone do not have savings for some reason, like whatever. And they're like literally sitting here being like, like, but it cannot leave. But the problem is that these people cannot create the good game quality because it's just not how creative people work. Like if you are intellectually and emotionally castrated from 9 to 5, like sitting into the room of the same people, and you have no word or right to basically go and raise any issues or a problem, like you cannot produce anything of the essence. It's just not how it works. And then there are people who are just compliable to the new structure, and they're like your good corporate soldiers. Like they know how to build a career. They do not know how to build a game, but they know how to build a career. They promote it very quickly. Like, and thinking about this whole environment, like, and this is where we came to for the last like maybe 6-7 years at this point. Not everywhere, there are exceptions. Like there are companies who are very serious about preserving the integrity of their technical departments. Talking about Epic, for example, one of the smartest companies in the business. But most of the publisher sectors or most of the internal development sectors, right? Like they're like somehow affected by this model and by this idea. And people who potentially could build great games, people who are like passionate and they just like do great stuff and shit. These people tend to be very inconvenient by the definition. Just creative, talented person is a fucking disaster to everyone in business. Like it's a person who constantly has something to say, disagrees, too loud, often smokes, often drinks, like often just skips the day, comes up in an office at night, like does shit unexpectedly, like very hard to calculate and presume. But this is why they're defined as creative geniuses, right? Like in many senses. And those people mostly been squeezed out from the industry at this point. Someone just left voluntarily. For someone, their life in office been made miserable, so they just left. Like it's an old corporate game which is very similar to the high school games. Like it's just a lot of gaslighting, lots of ghosting. Like it's just making sure your coffee is always cold. Like all that shit, right? Like and some people just been laid off. Some people just been fired.